The People's Platform.
Good evening and welcome to the People's Platform. Dynamite fishing or blast fishing is one of the most harmful and illegal practices that has been flagged, where experts say it is now rampantly practiced across several coastal areas in Sri Lanka, causing irreparable damage to the marine ecosystems. Tonight's topic of discussion will focus on this and other urgent threats to Sri Lanka's marine ecosystems. I'm pleased to welcome to the studio A.Rajasuriya, coral reef ecologist and also former marine biologist at the National Aquatic Resources Research and Development Agency. Good evening and welcome to the show.
Good evening.
I'm also pleased to welcome to the show Darshana Jayawardena, underwater explorer and author. Welcome, Darshana.
Good evening.
My first question is to Mr. A.Rajasuriya. Could you initially take us through what this practice of dynamite fishing or blast fishing entails and how exactly it causes the extent of damage that it does?
Dynamite fishing is done basically from a small boat.
Okay.
And sticks of dynamite tied together will be lit and thrown into the water. When the fisherman spots a school of fish, such as an aggregation of fish, and the idea is to maximize the catch. And thereafter they will use dip nets, and sometimes they will dive and collect the fish that are at the bottom. But it causes a lot of damage to the marine ecosystem because it blasts everything within a certain range, and the blast can be made very strong or light depending on the school of fish. And it also kills everything, even the larvae in the water. And if done close to a coral patch or a reef area, it will also cause a lot of damage to that habitat. And it will break the corals and also kill everything that is in that area. And after the blast, you will find some fish floating up onto the surface where they will be picked up with a dip net. And today, people also use scuba diving equipment to collect what sinks to the bottom.
Right.
This has been a practice for a long time. I would say for the last 5 to 6 decades. It started first in a very small scale way,
Okay.
Somebody going out in a canoe and throwing one stick of dynamite and collecting it. But today it has expanded to an organized crime level. Cell phones help it a lot because people communicate with each other, and even when the authorities come, they will speak to each other and then maybe throw the dynamite into the sea and try to avoid detection. So it is also something that is very difficult to detect if you collect the dynamited fish, that it is difficult to prove that it is dynamited.
Okay.
Because fish are not poisoned. It's simply the concussion that kills it, the explosion.
Right.
So fish that are very close to this blast will have broken spines, bleeding gills, and so on. But beyond that, they are dead fish. It's very difficult to detect. So this often happens that while I was at NARA, in the marine biology division gets what has been caught as dynamited fish. The police bring it. But it's very difficult to actually prove that that is dynamited fish. And sometimes when dynamiters are caught by the police or the Navy, they get off with a small fine. So that's really a problem. And it's widespread. It's happening very much in the Gulf of Mannar area, the Wankale, that area, and also in Trincomalee, around the Pigeon Island Marine National Park. Although it's not happening inside the park, it is happening in the periphery. And this has a huge impact not only on the marine biodiversity in the area, but also the abundance of fish. because it is killing everything around the area. So even the marine parks or the protected areas lose as a result, although it is done outside the protected area. It also happens in Gaul and the Hikkaduwa area.
So
And,
across the coastal line?
yes, there are gaps. You know, for example, in the Colombo area, it's not happening.
Sure.
Colombo, Nigambu, Chilawu area, it's not happening, but it's happening north of Kalpitiya. So if you take the Trincomalee, the east coast, it is happening around Trincomalee, and also sometimes around Batiklo area. There are some parts of the coastline where this is not happening.
Darshana, I'd like to come to you as an underwater explorer yourself. Speak to us about some of the destruction and damage that you yourself have witnessed caused by practices such as dynamite fishing. And also, I'd like you to weigh in on the impacts this has on marine tourism.
Right, yeah, certainly. Sonali, so in my experience, I've been diving for the last 20 or so years. And on several locations, my experience has been you are diving underwater to see something beautiful, right? Something that's natural, and you want to have a natural experience. And you end up seeing a lot of dead fish. And you can see the damage that it has done to reefs, and not only to reefs. One of the greatest assets we have in Sri Lanka are shipwrecks, sunken ships, right, with great tourism revenue potential. And you can see even the shipwrecks have been damaged because of these blast fishing practices. So I think this is an unseen crime, and because it's an unseen crime, a lot of people get away with doing it because the general public will not see it. I think the equivalent way to describe this would be, imagine poaching is illegal. Same way dynamite fishing is illegal, poaching is illegal. Imagine the poachers, instead of using guns, they use bombs to kill, let's say, deer or some animal they want to catch, right? The bomb will destroy the trees, the birds, the worms. That whole area becomes a void ecosystem. So imagine that happening underwater.
Right.
Where the whole ecosystem is just blasted, and the dynamite fishers will fishing people will move from reef to reef.
Right.
And in countries like Kenya, Nairobi, entire reef systems have been destroyed. So the greatest danger, I think, for us is the loss of tourism revenue. We are in a situation that we want to encourage tourism, we want to develop the tourism product, and actually ADB is working with the government, the tourism board, to develop Trincomalee, Gaul and Kalpitiya as marine tourism hotspots. And especially Trincomalee is in grave danger, because if the tourists, when they are diving, they see dead fish and they write reviews about Sri Lanka diving, and if they say we are seeing dead fish, no one is going to come and dive in Sri Lanka.
Right.
If by any chance the dynamite is dropped near a tourist, and there was experience last year where it clearly showed dynamite being thrown in while the tourists were underwater, and you can see how scared they were.
Okay.
Right? Their experience shared on the internet is going to be that we are seeing dynamite diving. We are not seeing beautiful shipwrecks, we are not seeing beautiful reefs, we are experiencing dynamite while we are underwater. So it's extremely dangerous for our tourism product. And the worldwide diving tourism is a $4 to $6 billion industry. It's going to grow. Right now, our ability to attract divers is maybe we earn about $5 to $10 million at best. Okay. So we have a huge area to expand into. Huge amount of revenue we can get from diving tourism. Right. If you take countries like Malaysia, Thailand, Maldives, their revenue, direct and indirect, from diving is about 350 to 500 million annual. Right? We are not even scratching the surface in the potential to get that amount of revenue. And the greatest asset we have compared to these countries is the enormous number of shipwrecks, historical shipwrecks, World War I shipwrecks, World War II shipwrecks, the other age of steam shipwrecks. We have the oldest shipwreck in South Asia, the Godawai shipwreck. So there is an enormous tourism potential, enormous ability to make a lot of foreign currency for the country. So it's absolutely vital that we protect the assets that can generate tourism revenue.
Thank you for that. Now, dynamite fishing is prohibited under the Fisheries and Aquatic Resources Act number 2 of 1996 by prohibiting the use or possession of poisonous or explosive substances. There are also other laws such as the Fauna and Flora Protection Ordinance, which governs aspects such as these. Despite these legal safeguards, this practice continues as an organized operation, as you said before. If we look at the key stakeholders, the Sri Lanka Navy, Ministry of Fisheries, Sri Lanka Coast Guard, Department of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources, these are some of the key stakeholders that are engaged in protecting the marine ecosystems inter alia. What do you think are the loopholes? What is going wrong here?
Well, Sri Lanka has been trying to catch these dynamiters out at sea, which is a very difficult thing to do because there are thousands of small fishing crafts, and it is almost impossible for one of these authorities to have a large number of boats and people out there trying to catch these dynamiters. But what needs to be done is to actually check how these people acquire this stuff. And that is all happening on land.
Right.
Somebody is storing it, somebody is transporting it, somebody is trading it. So that's where you need to really target to stop this activity, because trying to stop them at sea has not been very successful. I mean, we've been trying for the last 4 to 5 decades, I said, but it has not been successful.
Darshana, what are your perspectives on this? Where do you think are the gaps in the law's implementation?
Yeah, I think as Arjun earlier said, the dynamite fishing gangs are very well coordinated and they use latest technology to carry out their operations, and they separate the activities. So for example, they have spotters who look for the fish, then they have the boats ready with the dynamite who will go in and dump the dynamite and they will vanish.
Right.
Then there will be a separate, maybe a boat coming with the divers and quickly collecting the fish and going. So they are very well coordinated. It's very hard to see. The ocean is a big place, right? It's impossible to cover everywhere, and for the Navy or the Coast Guard to monitor every aspect of it. Then I think there might be element of corruption involved in this, as is organized crime. And the laws and the legislation, I would say, is also not adequate in terms of apprehending and enforcing penalties for this crime. So I think there are several multifaceted gaps in the whole story here.
We're going for a short commercial break. We'll be right back.
The People's Platform.
ජනාධිපතිතුමාගේ විදිහට අපි ගොඩද
මේ ප්‍රතිපත්ති රාමුවත් මේකත් හිස් වූ රාමුවක්
නායකෙක්ට පුළුවන් අවශ්‍යයි නම් සංවේදීත් වෙලා ඒ වෙලාවෙම තාර්කිකත් වෙන්න.
ජානමය හේතුත් බලපාන්න පුළුවන් ද සමහර වෙලාවට මානසික තත්ත්ව වෙනස් වෙන්න.
මානසික රෝගයක් 80%ක් ජානගතයි. 20%ක් එන්වයරන්මන්ට් එකේ ඉන්නේ.
නින්දේදිත් සිදුවෙන ශ්වසන අපහසුතාවන් පිළිබඳ අපිට වාර්තා වෙනවා. මේක ගොරවනකොට වැඩි වෙනවද?
නින්දේදී සිදුවන ශ්වසන අවහිරතාවය නැත්නම් අපි මේක හඳුන්වනවා මේ obstructive sleep apnea කියන තත්ත්වය.
ජාතික මෙහෙවර සතියේ දිනවල උදෑසන 11ට.
Because this impacts every single person living in the country.
All these jokers who completely vehemently opposed it, right? And now saying, no, we are okay with them. We have to work with them. We will work with them.
All the people who have supported him for these corrupt practices have been taken in.
Because sadly, our people in this country now think that this is a protest vote, that all the major two parties have failed, and let's give a third party another chance.
Why can't the government officer be entrepreneur as well?
I believe most of political parties don't have internal democracy.
TV1 TV for life. In the presence of Gotabaya, Ranil explains how to build the economy. visit to Sri Lanka and Pakistan sent a message to the enemies and friends in the region and the world, says Iran's president. Chinese Communist Party delegates meet SJB and UNP, while Indian High Commissioner continues talks with political groups. What is India trying to do with the Ramayan Trail in Sri Lanka? Questions MP Govindu in Parliament. Easter attacks perpetrated by a group of Islamist extremists, and CID failed to apprehend the terrorists before they struck, says Gotabaya. Anura explains why he added Ibrahim into the JVP's national list. TV1, TV for life. The People's Platform.
Welcome back. Our topic of discussion tonight is urgent threats to Sri Lanka's marine ecosystems. My guests on the show tonight are A.Rajasuriya, coral reef ecologist, and Darshana Jayawardena, underwater explorer and author. Mr. Rajasuriya, when we speak about the importance of mainstreaming issues surrounding dynamite fishing, are those people who are living in coastal areas, who are affected by this issue of dynamite fishing, actually aware that it's taking place in their neighborhood? That's my first question. My second question is, are those engaged in marine tourism as one of the key stakeholders in this enterprise making some noise about the impacts that this issue has had?
Well, the first question, I can say that the local fishermen who are doing legitimate fishing, they are fully aware of this activity.
Right.
But the point is that they are scared to do anything about it, because those who are involved in this activity of blast fishing are basically criminals. So there is a threat for the local fishermen who try to take action against them.
Sure.
So that is the answer to that first question, whether people are aware of this.
My second question is, are those engaged in marine tourism making enough noise about this issue?
Well, that again is that few would try to report this.
Okay.
For the same reason. Because when they are underwater, they are very vulnerable.
Right.
Dynamiters could explode very close to them.
Okay.
And this has also happened to a couple of friends of mine who tried to actually take action against the dynamiters.
Okay.
So he was pursued, and when he was down with some clients, somebody exploded dynamite really close to them, and then he backed off.
Right, so there is a lot of intimidation.
There's a lot of intimidation because it is done in such a way, this criminal gangs sort of thing.
Right. And the authorities are aware, obviously.
I would think that it is something that we need to bring up into the mainstream.
Of course.
And then authorities have to actually take action against this, because Sri Lanka can't progress if such things are going on, particularly in terms of economics and fisheries industry, and as Darshana was saying about tourism. So all that needs to be taken into consideration, and this has to be really stopped in that way. The authorities have to do that.
Darshana, there is societally a misconception that it is poverty that drives fishermen to engage in such illegal practices such as dynamite fishing. Speak to us about how you do this.
So I think that's I would think that's a bit of a misconception. So when we are out in the ocean, we actually mingle around with a lot of fishermen. And they really don't, and these are the fishermen who are involved in legitimate forms of fishing. They are not at all supportive about dynamite fishing. They don't like it because it actually affects their ability to catch fish. Because if the reefs and the fishing stocks are destroyed, they can't fish. So they don't like it. And actually as I said, to organize dynamite fishing, it's the criminal elements who has resources who can actually procure these explosives, organize the boats, organize scuba tanks. It's a business operation.
Right.
So it's not the people who are poor who is doing this. It's the people who have resources and the criminal gangs who are doing it. And also every day from Trincomalee we are hearing reports of dynamite fishing happening in diving sites. And some of these diving sites have been created by the government of Sri Lanka. The Navy has, for example, dumped buses to create tourist attractions. Dynamite fishing happens on these artificially created dive sites that are meant for tourists. And when the tourists go and dive there, all they see is dead fish. So it's very, very dangerous. It's a clear and present danger for our tourism industry, marine tourism industry.
Speak to us also about the number of arrests that have been made through the years.
So I don't have the exact numbers, but I know that when the Navy is alerted, they go in and they sometimes arrest. When it's possible, they arrest arrest the perpetrators. Unfortunately, the whole process of bringing them to justice is not very short, and it might require for the Navy to be present in a court case, and the amount of fines imposed are very, very low. I believe 25,000 rupees. And they will get out on bail and then do the same thing the next day. So our legal system is also not geared towards punishing dynamite fishing.
I'd also like us to discuss some of the other urgent threats to Sri Lanka's marine ecosystems. Another issue that has been flagged is ghost netting or marine fishing litter. Speak to us about how this severely impacts marine biodiversity.
Lots of fishing gear get lost along the way.
Okay.
Sometimes they break off because they get entangled on underwater structures, maybe a reef or a shipwreck. And then the fishermen are unable to retrieve this. So that part of the net remains there and it continues to entangle fish and other species. So these are the ones that we call the ghost nets, or what is commonly known as ghost fishing. And there are also times when fishermen actually discard their old nets.
Right.
Sometimes nets that cannot be used anymore are just discarded. So all of these things add up to basically plastic like junk underwater, because when the nets degrade, they also end up as microplastic. So there was a study that was done by IUCN some time ago, and this is the publication of that, particularly on ghost fishing and ghost nets in the Mana area. So this is the kind of thing that happens, and it's necessary to clean these wrecks and reefs of these things. But then the more important thing is to prevent that from happening.
What can be done to ensure that we prevent harms such as these from taking place in the future? What preventative measures can be taken? What steps should the government take? What kind of awareness can we create societally?
Yeah, so I will answer it perhaps pertaining more towards the dynamite fishing and maybe the plastics issue. So clearly the dynamite fishing, I think we need more enforcement, we need more action by the government to curtail the movement, free movement of explosives, illegal explosives.
Okay.
And also patrolling vital marine tourism sites, especially the Trincomalee tourism economic zone, to ensure that dynamite fishing does not happen in those areas. When it comes to, I think, plastic pollution, it's a very big subject. I think, globally it's a big subject, and unfortunately it's a byproduct of our consumerism, right? When we go to supermarket, we're actually contributing to the problem. So awareness of this at a government level, the recycling infrastructure, reusing, recycling infrastructure. So these are extremely big issues. And the only way to manage plastic pollution or polythene pollution is to have a very good recycling and reusing infrastructure in the country. Yeah, so I think as measures to preventive measures and to curtail this, I see a couple of steps. One is to curtail the free movement of explosives, dangerous explosives, because that's where the root cause is. How do these criminal elements get explosive to throw it out in the sea? And then enforcement in the ocean itself, more patrolling in the high value economic zone in Trinco, which has been identified as a source for tourism revenue.
Mr. Rajasuriya, concluding remarks, what more needs to be done?
I think education plays a great role here,
Sure.
especially the younger generations. And we need to provide alternative employment and vocational training to the younger fishermen in their communities, because otherwise they tend to follow their fathers, and then they also get into that same trap and increase the problem.
Right.
So that's the way that the government should actually target this to the younger generations. And it can't be solved overnight.
Sure.
But set targets, and over a period of 10 years, we'll reduce the number of this plastic and dynamiting and all of that within the first 5 years, and then reduce more within the next 5 years, like that, so you achieve your target at the end of a certain period.
Sure.
That is the way to approach it, because there's no immediate solution other than the use of explosives. That really requires a immediate action.
Sure. How do we get rid of the bad guys?
Well, I don't think you can get rid of the bad guys. The problem is to convert them. Because there have been instances in the world where dynamiters have become conservationists.
Really?
Yes. There was one person in Kayankani which I converted.
Right.
And he was dynamiting over a long period of time. And then eventually during one of the NARA studies, I used him to do some work, and then he got converted. After that, he stopped dynamiting. He didn't even allow the aquarium fish collectors to fish there.
Right.
So that's the way to go about it.
All right. Fantastic.
You have to be more inclusive.
And finally, Darshan, do you think there is sufficient resource allocation in this respect to prevent dynamite fishing, to create awareness surrounding this issue?
I don't think so. I think it's very minimal. And again, as I said, it's an unseen crime for people living in Sri Lanka. It happens in the ocean. No one knows whether it happens.
Right.
So I would say 10% maybe.
All right. Thank you very much, A.Rajasuriya and Darshana Jayawardena, for coming into the studio and for sharing your expertise and perspectives. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Sonali.
Thank you for watching us. We'll see you again tomorrow. Good night.